as soon as they come back on. Go ahead.
Good to go?
Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth
Recording in progress.
And development of the community, to hold public hearings and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, please take the roll.
Okay, Mr. Dean.
Here.
Mr. Freed.
Here.
Ms. Herron.
Here.
Mr. Kennard.
Here.
Mr. Kelp.
Here.
Ms. Messina.
Here.
Ms. Pearson.
Here.
Mr. Tabobin.
Here.
And Mr. Warner. Okay, I see Mr.
Here.
All right, we have 9 for a quorum.
Great, thank you, Chris. Next item is item B, approval of the minutes for the March 21st meeting. Are there any changes or corrections from any of the members of the commission? Not seeing any, I call for a motion to approve the minutes.
Commissioner Dean, I motion to approve.
Second, Commissioner Kennard.
We have a motion and a second. Chris, could you take the vote, please?
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Mr. Freed.
Aye.
Ms. Herron.
Aye.
Mr. Kennard.
Aye.
Mr. Kelp.
Aye.
Ms. Messina.
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
Mr. Tabobin.
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
We have a vote of 9-0.
Thank you. Next, item C on the agenda is declaration of conflict of interest, ex parte communications by members of the commission or staff.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's not truly a conflict of interest, but I am going to be abstaining from action item number 1 due to a pending matter involving a client.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cout. Is there anyone else? All right, then we shall move on to item D, which are the action items. Item 1 is item 2023-2032 CIP, reviewing the City of Topeka's capital improvement program. Ensure it's consistent with a comprehensive plan. Mr. Warner, it looks like you're up on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commission, I've got a short presentation for you. So this is just a quick summary of the 2023-2032 CIP. It's the City of Topeka's capital improvement plan. Topeka Municipal Code states that the Planning Commission shall review the city's CIP to ensure that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And it references in that language KSA 12-748, which says basically the same thing. So really, oops, I had to back up, sorry. So really what we're doing tonight is reviewing the CIP to ensure it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff's provided a memo and a summary of projects with your packets. We've highlighted the projects that we are looking at in the spreadsheet and included project summary sheets as well. This map shows the projects that are in your packets on a map that is the Topeka urban growth area. So these projects, which makes a lot of sense, they are within tier 1 of our urban growth area, being City of Topeka CIP projects. I would just want to highlight 3 of them that are circled in yellow. So the southern project there is Southwest 37th Street. It's a street improvement project between Burlingame and Scapa Place. That's a countywide half-cent sales tax project. There's a project in Oakland for Seward Avenue. And that's street improvement from Sumner to Forest. And then the next one is Lyman Road, which is between Tyler and Vale, another street improvement project. So staff's recommendation is that the CIP is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
I'm not saying anyone has any questions. Is this an action item that we need to take a vote on? It appears so. I would ask for a motion regarding the 2023 to 2032 capital improvement plan.
This is Commissioner Kanar. I would move that we find the proposed capital improvement program 2023 to 2032 is in compliance with the with the plan. Sorry, with the capital improvement plan. Thank you.
Commissioner Dean, I would second.
Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any. Oh, yes.
I can't believe we're talking about 2032.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so a little ways away. Since there's no other discussion, I guess, Chris, we will take a vote on the motion.
Okay, I'll read the roll from the bottom up. Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Mr. Chababin,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
Mr. Kelp,
Abstain.
Mr. Kanar,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
and Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes 8-0 with 1 abstaining.
All right, next item is CU 2201 by Lamar Advertising requesting a conditional use permit on property zone PUD, planned unit development. And we have,
I'll be presenting the case.
okay, Ms. Warner.
Mr. Chairman, that is Will Sharp. He's our soon to be minted planner for our department.
Sorry, Mr. Sharp, I missed you on the screen. I apologize.
It's okay. Okay. This is a conditional use permit by Lamar Advertising. The property is located on Southwest 29th Street, approximately 500 feet east of Gage Boulevard. The lot is 0.59 acres in size, and they are wanting to rebuild an existing 672 square foot billboard onto an updated monopole structure that is approximately 40 feet to the west of its current location. The zoning map for this location has C2 commercial to the north of it. It is There's a PUD, planned unit development with C4 commercial use directly to the west. You have office and institutional 2 to the south of the site. And directly to the east is R1 single family. However, that lot is occupied by an Evergy substation, not a single family residence. The future land use map for the area has the site as large commercial per the land use growth management plan. And this is the site plan and the sketch for the billboard. Like I said previously, the billboard will be moved approximately 40 feet to the west of its current location. This will remove the existing billboard and it will be rebuilt on a monopole structure. There will be a minimum setback of 20 feet from the street right of way. And the total sign area of the billboard will be 672 square feet. And I would be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Cobb.
Mr. Sharp, in a couple places in the staff report, it is mentioned that the sign is legal non-conforming. What is the nature of the non-conformance? And then secondly, if the CUP is granted, will that resolve the non-conformance?
Well, I believe in the Topeka Municipal Code that for billboards inside Topeka, one has to be removed in order for a new billboard to get put up. So that is a requirement in the TMC. With off-premise signs like billboards, they are regulated in the Topeka Municipal Code, but due to the age of the billboard, it could be considered non-conforming but legal. I don't know if either
I can potentially help with that. Will a new billboard, for instance, would need to be 300 square feet. So the nonconformity is likely in the size of the sign. We have specific conditions about relocating non-conforming billboards, which falls under the CUP. So the CUP will make this sign legal.
Okay, so the 672 square feet on the existing sign, that's the nature of the non-conformance. Is that right, Dan?
I believe so, yes.
It's not the height and it's not encroaching on any required setback.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Cap, there's
There's-
also a requirement for new billboards to be monopole
Right.
construction. This is currently not.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Any other questions of staff? Not seeing any, I would then ask if there is someone from the property owner or a representative to speak on behalf of the application.
Yes, Travis Brown. I'm the real estate manager for Lamar Advertising in Topeka. Will summed it up pretty well. The piece of property, the whole piece of property is actually owned by us as well. So yeah, and just that's what we're doing. We're wanting to move it down more central in the property, update it to a modern single pole structure. And obviously we will abide by the required 20-foot setback by the CUP. But that's what we're after, is updating our structure and bringing it down more central onto the piece of property that we own.
All right, are there any questions of the property owner from the commission? All right, thank you, sir. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this application? Not seeing any, I would then declare that the public hearing on this matter is closed. And I would go back. Any commissioners have any further questions of staff or any comments they wish to make regarding this item? All right. Once again, facing silence, I would then ask for a motion to either to approve or deny the application.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. Based upon the findings and analysis in the staff report, we recommend approval for the subject to conditions stated in the staff report. Does that work?
I think that works. Does that work for the staff?
Yes.
Okay, we're good. Thank you, Ms. Messina.
This is Commissioner Pearson. I second that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I will ask Chris to take the vote.
Okay, Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Kennard,
Aye.
Mr. Kelp,
Aye.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
Mr. Tabavan
Aye.
and Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0.
All right, next item on the agenda is PUD 2202, the North Vista Apartments by Redden Construction and Property Management LLC, requesting to amend the district zoning map for property on Northeast US 24 Highway. And Mr. Warner, is that your presentation?
Sure is. Thank you. Okay. So the subject property is located along the south side of the frontage road for US Highway 24. It's approximately 200 feet east of North Kansas Avenue. The PUD is to allow the development of affordable apartments. The project consists of one-story buildings with one-bedroom apartments. There will be a total of 75 units. Staff is recommending approval of the PUD zoning subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. This is a view of the existing structure on the property, which is a hotel that's been converted to residential units. Another view of that existing building, it's the development that's south of this building or to the right. That will be the first phases of this project. The zoning in the area is a mixture of C4 and I1. You can see a little bit of single family to the south. Mixing uses within a commercial area is supported in the comprehensive plan. So adding higher density residential use contributes to the overall mixing of uses within the commercial area. And in addition, the Topeka Housing Market Study notes there's a need for quality, affordable housing. Future land use shows this area as being part of a large commercial area. We think the scale of the project, the building heights, setbacks, et cetera, is consistent with the character of the area. The PUD also includes perimeter fencing, internal sidewalks, and a pedestrian connection to Kansas Avenue. This is looking at what would ultimately be the build out or the final phase of the development. So this project will be phased to start out with. So development will start on the south side of the property and the existing structure on the property will remain. As development proceeds to the north, ultimately the existing building will be removed. The project includes variances for density of the project and the required parking. And this master plan notes that there's a pedestrian connection to Kansas Avenue where there's a bus stop, which is a pretty important part of this project. With that, commissioners, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions of staff?
Yes, this is Commissioner Pearson. I do have a question, probably a clarification, or just increase my my knowledge set. Okay. You frequently mention that this is affordable housing. How is that determined and by whom?
That information we got from the developer. That's his intention, is to build an affordable housing project. And he can probably explain more of that when it's his time to talk about the project.
Okay. So we don't have any standard that they necessarily have to meet. They just have to say it.
Yeah, basically. Okay. I mean, yes. Okay. If they were seeking certain funding for some project, they might have to be a little more specific, but yeah, we're going on the intention for the project. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Cobb.
Thank you. Dan, a couple questions. The staff report notes that under the current M2 zoning, the maximum density for dwelling unit is 15 dwelling units per acre. I don't know what the current density level is for the motel there, but if there's 75 units ultimately going into this location at a little under 2 acres, that's increasing the density to 38, 40, somewhere in there, dwelling units per acre. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And no variance is required for that.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are asking, or the applicant is asking for a variance for that.
Yes. So just a little background on the zoning. So the M2 has the 15 dwelling units to the acre as a cap, a density cap. We think M2 is the better choice here because of the size of the buildings. They're 1-story type buildings. Even if we were going for M3, which is a density of 30 units to the acre, we would need the variance to that as well. So the M2 is really to be more consistent with what they're trying to build. And then the variance we need regardless. And we'll, as we get into the missing middle presentation later, kind of be talking a little bit more about density issues we have in our zoning code.
Okay. Dan, there are a number of organizations in Topeka that have been advocating for some time now for increases in the availability of affordable housing. Cornerstone, Habitat for Humanity, and Topeka Jump, I think are 3, probably more. Do any of those organizations, would you get an application like this, or any of those organizations contacted or solicited for their input, since this is being brought forward as addressing some of the affordable housing problem that Topeka has?
So we do not do that. No, we notify, just start through our general zoning process. I don't know if the applicant has reached out to those organizations as he kind of puts together his project, but no, we're not in the context of a zoning case. We don't really do that.
Okay. Last question, Dan, for right now. What distinguishes this project from a motel? How is it different than a motel?
It's the operation of it. It's meant for long-term stay. It's an apartment. That's the difference in my mind. It's not a 30-day or short-term stay situation going on here. It's an apartment, just like any other apartment in town. It's just the scale and the 1-story nature of it might be a little different, but it's a sort of a small multifamily project.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dan.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Tabavan.
Yes, just a quick question for Dan. I know you said we have access to a transit route. Our staff apparently is comfortable with the amount of parking. I think we had 65 spaces for 75 units.
Yes and yes. Yeah, the transit is nearby, so that's the why we asked or pushed for that connection, because they're not right next to Kansas Avenue.
Right.
And then the parking, the clientele that they're going for here isn't necessarily going to have a car, so they're comfortable with that number. We're not, our parking code is what it is, and we're agreeable to some tweaks to that if it makes sense for the project, and we think it does in this case.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mr.
I just
Go
have
ahead,
one more
Ms.
question.
Pearson. Go
My
ahead.
apologies for interrupting. I just want to make sure I'm clear that I understand the owner is going to tear down the existing structures to rebuild apartments that they consider to be affordable housing. Is that correct?
Eventually. So there's a portion of that property to the south of that existing building that's vacant. So they will start back there. The plan anyway is to start back there with new construction, build those new units. And as they move south, build more units. And once they get to a certain point, that existing building will be removed.
Okay. So they're currently apartments. They just want to update and upgrade. Is that correct?
They are currently apartments. I guess maybe that's a better, the rest of that question might be better for the applicant.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Warner, if it ends up where everyone in the apartment has a vehicle, what are there locations for vehicles to park beyond the spaces on the property anywhere in the surrounding area?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Okay, not seeing any, then I would invite the property owner or their representative. I see Mr. Falk is there if you would like to go ahead and present. You are muted.
Hey, I'm Brian Falk. I'm the architect representing the property owner. I answer a few of the questions. These are meant for, they're very small apartments. What are they about? 500 to 400 square feet. And so by nature, they're going to be very cost effective because they're small. They're meant for people that are coming sometimes out of the rescue mission. So it's a little bit different than your typical apartment complex. The owner has agreements with various organizations in town, including the rescue mission, and I'll let them get into that a little bit more. Catholic Charities, a whole bunch. I'll let him talk about that later. But it's really for people kind of on the edge and that they need assistance, and the housing costs will reflect that. Because those same type of people are maybe coming from the rescue mission, they're less likely to have a vehicle. They manage their own. The owner manages their own properties. And so both of them are very good about making sure they're kept up, that they have the right type of people in the properties. It's a good fit for both them and the tenant. And so they'll be able to manage the right amount of people coming in with vehicles as well. So they can see if, we're filled up with vehicles. They'll try to find tenants that don't have vehicles to kind of make sure they don't overflow. The existing apartment complex on the north side is not in good condition. It really needs to be removed eventually. And that's one of the reasons why it's a phased project. They're going to start with the properties on the south, and then they're going to replace the property on the north as time and kind of money allow, maybe a few years down the road. You guys want to jump in?
Yes, sure. My name is Dan, and my wife is Dina. We are the owners of the North Topeka apartments right now. In that location, the existing, we got 16 The apartment is old, but we make sure that the people who lives there are comfortable. The question earlier is about, are we talking to the organizations that are advocating for low income? This project has been designed to what the needs of our community. We talked to Topeka Rescue Mission. We signed them with a memorandum of understanding that their guests that are showing capability to make their lives better, like the people that works in the kitchen, that works every day, that having hard time to find an apartment. So we are the good fit for them because we make sure that we watch them as they turn their lives around. Our plan is to require no income restriction because most of the apartment complex around Topeka, they require not more than a third of the income should go to the rent. More than that, you cannot afford it anymore. But for us, since we designed this project to cater to those people that have a low income, most of our residents right now making only $800 from their Social Security, disability and Social Security income. Our rent right now in this location is the $450 a month with a $450 deposit, all utilities paid, including cable. So for a $450, if they're making $800, they still have a little more money to buy their food. But we know that the Topeka area have, I think, 3 organizations that provide food every week. So I know that when they pay the rent, they are not gonna go hungry. But every time there's a repair in the apartment, I'm the one, the owner shows up to repair it. I'm the one that exterminate for bugs because I wanna see how they're doing. So we cannot keep up with the demand in that area. So I know there are businesses around it. So our neighbors, we talk to the neighbors to make sure that we're not gonna disturb them when these new constructions go up. And they are very happy that we as owners are really the one manage the property, because before the owner have a management company that it's a better place now because the owner was there every day watching the property. So we coordinated with Catholic Charities, Vallejo, Midland Care, Topeka Shelter Plus, Cornerstone, and Habitat for Humanity. So we asked this organization how we can help them. So right now, the focus is not too big. It's just small enough for them to turn their lives around, make sure that they go through the process of making their life better. And then sometimes we're not so successful because some of the homeless people that we help, they thought that they're still homeless. So they try to not clean up in their apartment. So sad to say, sometimes we have to let them go. We have to give them 30-day notice to move out because they start bringing dogs and they start bringing another homeless people come in too. So they still not ready to respect rules for apartments. So, and Topeka Rescue Mission understand that. So Topeka Rescue Mission, they send us their guests to us, and some are successful, some are not. Right now, Vallejo, if they have people that their clients cannot find a place where, according to the income, which is very small, but for us, as long as they can pay the rent and they keep it quiet and keep it clean, make sure that they pay the rent on time. And if they cannot pay the rent, they cannot talk to me. And then do we reach out to organization like the city if they can help them? We don't kick them out right away. We make sure that they've been given a chance to available organization that can help them. So we talked to the city mayor about this project. We talked to the city manager and the city attorney. And I believe the city mayor said that, instead of having small houses, this is better, a small space. Once they changes, when their situation changes in the future, then they can go forward to make it a bigger area, bigger space. The city manager, I believe, is impressed about this project, and we're very thankful for the city planning that allows us to move forward with this project. We are not using taxpayers' money. We are not doing low-income tax credit. This is a private funded project with the lead of community Topeka Community Foundation, Marcia Pope. Marcia Pope is the one that will provide some of the funding for this, and Marcia Pope is working tirelessly to find the remaining money for this. So this is a regular loan because we want to make sure that our project is designed to what the low-income affordable housing needs in this community.
One thing I want to add, what's really pretty awesome about his program is that he takes on tenants that probably 99% of other landlords won't take on. So if they, I've got a few apartments, and I really look up to what they're doing because they're filling a need the community has, because they'll take on people that have, you know, background issues or bad credit, can't make payments, lots of stuff that most people, I'm not going to mess with these people. They're interested in helping them as part of their mission.
We have a story that one homeless lady that stays in the park and it's very cold, and we pick her up and we put her in the apartment without lease agreement. But Catholic Charities promised us that, hey, then don't worry about it. We'll pay for her deposit and first month rent. So we put her in, we give her bed, she's happy. So I think right now, before she said that she stays under the stairs, and I asked her why, how can she sleep? She said she can't because it's cold. But we give her an apartment, and she only makes $800, and she cannot find an apartment for her. So I cannot understand why, but that's why this project is being created, because of the need.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions?
This is Commissioner Pearson. I have a couple of questions, probably just
Yes,
one
Ms.
question.
Pearson.
Thank you. So if I understood you correctly, you'll be receiving some subsidies for your rent. Is that okay?
No.
I thought I heard you say something about Topeka Community Foundation helping and then working with other organizations.
Topeka Community Foundation is working on, they are willing to help us for the loan. That means they can provide, we are architect Brian thinking about 1.2 to 1.4 million needed for this. So some of the money, which is from Topeka Community Foundation, they are willing to loan us the money, some of it, not the whole amount, because their organization cannot afford. But this is not a subsidy. This is not a grant or anything. We're gonna work hard to pay it back. And the only reason why it's not taxpayers' money or it's not a grant is we want to make sure that our operation can cater really to the need of the community. We want to make sure that we are not bound to a long lease that it's so hard to operate when you have a long lease and then your tenant is disrespecting your rules because of their situation. Most of our residents right now have a little mental issue. They talk to themselves most of the time, but they're not violent. So I talk to them. I'm okay with it. So as long as the neighbors are not bothered by it, most of the residents understood who I'm helping with, so they know that most of them are given a second chance. And the most grateful people are the people that given a second chance. I believe once they found us, most of the people that makes their lives turn around, they respect the rules because this is the only chance they have.
I understand.
Brennan has a background. He's done some facility maintenance for LIHTC properties in the past, and he kind of knows what goes into that, and he just doesn't want to do that. He's got a better way of doing it, the paperwork and many other reasons beyond that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted to clarify, make sure I understood you, Brian, that there will be some tear down, but you're putting in brand new construction in its place.
Yes, the tear down is phase 2, and there'll be more apartments that will be created in phase 1 And then by the time we get to phase 2, it will increase the number even further.
And so how will you be managing the current tenants since it is apartments? Are they're just going to be living in a different section and you're going to be clearing out that section? Okay, I understand. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the property owner or the representative?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Cott.
if I could ask the applicant, first of all, knowing the details of your plan, very, very helpful in understanding, what's going on and the justification for the application. So thank you. And certainly it sounds very well intentioned and attempting to meet a need in the community. I have 2 questions for you, sir. One is, there are an awful lot of folks in this town looking for affordable housing. And if someone comes to you, not through Vallejo or any other of the organizations you mentioned, are you going to rent that apartment? Or how do you not rent when somebody comes knocking on the door and asking for a lease?
Okay, our standard operating procedure when you come to us, we're gonna do a background check for free. We want to make sure that you don't have a record of drug distribution, and you don't have an eviction recently. An eviction procedure gives a lot of time for the residents to make sure not to be evicted. You were given notice if you cannot pay, if you're given notice that you're violating the rules. So we believe that if you are evicted recently, you might be able to take advantage of this process that you can stay for free. We want to make sure that if you come to us, we make sure that your eviction is at least 5 or 10 years older, so that you will not be a repeat offender. So most of our residents right now, if they have eviction and they explain to us that the eviction is, for example, they're a couple and the woman, the man is the one making money and the man did not pay. And since they are the same in the list, then she is included in the eviction. So we give her a chance. So we'll say, okay, so since this is the scenario, but you know that if you will be evicted from our property, you cannot come back anymore. We will not gonna allow you to take advantage of the system where you can live for free. And because if you cannot pay, tell us, because we can help you in other organization. We can hook you up with the program with the government that if it's COVID related, you will be given a free rent as long as you can justify that this is COVID related. Catholic charities will always welcome if they have funding available. The Topeka Shelter Plus will always, if you have a little issue with alcohol, Topeka Shelter Plus can help you as long as you go through their program. So to answer the question, if somebody will come to us, we will background check them for free, and then we will listen to what their situation is. Then we will decide. Mostly the people that we cater right now, our clients are from Vallejo, Topeka Rescue Mission, Midland Care, Topeka Shelter Plus. Habitat for Humanity don't have any guests to us, but they promise us that to provide more, to provide building materials if we will build this one. So hopefully by doing that, if they have families needs to have a place to stay, then hopefully we can accommodate their guests.
I appreciate your answers, and I certainly understand that, and I believe you as what your intentions are. But just for example, sir, there's a Highway 24 is scheduled for some major reconstruction in the next few years. If a half dozen construction workers knocked on your door, there's no issue of their ability to pay. There's no issue of prior foreclosures or anything of any sort that makes them, questionable as tenants. Are you going to rent space out to those folks?
Yes.
And if not, how are you going to keep from doing so?
yes, we have to rent them because we cannot discriminate. This is not a government program that is lined up to where the income restriction is. So if a person comes to us and we have vacancy, we have to rent them.
And that's, you haven't set aside units for Vallejo's purposes or Cornerstones or anybody else. You've made contact with those organizations, but you've not committed so many dwelling units to any of those organizations. Is that fair to say?
Yes, yes. According to Topeka Risk Commission that we signed for memorandum of understanding, there will be no financial obligation from their organization. But they make sure that if we have some vacancies, we accommodate them without this process of, okay, it's been evicted, but if they say that here then this person is demonstrating a good behavior, can you let them stay? Yes, we will let them stay.
So if you have a vacancy, then people from those organizations have priority. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. The only organization that is promising to get a 10-unit apartment once this is done is the Midland Care. Midland Care, their clients, they are having hard time finding an affordable, peaceful place for their clients, mostly our seniors. So when we introduced this project to them, they said like, Reden, it's either we can partner you with the construction or we can take some 10 units from you. We will pay for it, and we don't know the details yet, but that's the initial conversation from them when we talk to them about this project.
Okay, just two other real quick questions. Is there an occupancy limit for the rooms?
Occupancy limit? Since this is very small, up to 2 people. If you're a couple, then it's good. Usually a one person, because it's a small kitchen, a small bathroom, small living room, and where they can sleep. This is to design where all the utilities are paid. They don't need to put their utilities in their name, water, electric, everything, so that they can just come in. We provided cable too. So cable is already, it's about $120 to install, but since we have bulk account, then it's cheaper for us to get those things so that when they come in, is that they are not only comfortable, but they have something they have cable to watch sports and every program that they like.
Last question, sir. Will there be on-site management?
Yes, there will be an on-site management. We are planning to hire the most responsible resident in the property to make sure that we have a sense of neighborhood watch in our property. That's it, based on my experience in low-income housing. We always make a neighborhood organization within the apartment complex so that they themselves have to police their own home. So that's the plan.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Kopp, I did want to follow up one of his comments with just personal background information. I also do low to moderate income housing, and the wait lists are so long across the city. I mean, I don't think it'll be a problem getting anyone in the door really quickly. If he has vacancies, I think he'll be able to turn those vacancies pretty quickly. If he's following a couple of different program guidelines pretty easily. Shelter Care Plus is one of them, especially targeted at chronic homelessness. So it was a very quick process for us. Just a little background information.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the owners or the representative? I'm not seeing there are any questions, so it's now open. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this application?
I'm Marcia Pope with the Topeka Community Foundation. I'm the president of that organization that Redan referred to earlier. We have created a local impact investment portfolio for Topeka, where we are trying to invest the endowment assets of our organization, a small percentage of those, into issues in our community for both a social and a financial return. And we feel like this project, when Redan came to us, this really fit what we were looking to invest in for our community. So I'm working with the CDFI in Missouri and trying to help Redan get the stack together in this deal so that we can finance this and move forward. But the Community Foundation is behind this project. This model is very unique in serving low-income residents, and we believe that other communities will be looking to us after this is done and using it as a model in their communities as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment? Yeah, Mr. Bell. You need to unmute, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Michael Bell. I'm the president of the Tennessee Town Neighborhood Improvement Association here in Topeka, and affordable housing has long been one of the primary goals for us since I became involved in that NIA back in 1996. I suppose in looking at this, and I certainly applaud the efforts of the developer here, but one of the first questions that came to my mind, because I used to live as a long-term resident at the Red Carpet Inn at 10th and Madison, so I have some experience with that. If I am currently a resident at the motel that's there right now as a long-term resident, and we get to phase 2 of this project, what happens to me?
Okay. Well, Mr. Bell, are there any other things when you're done, then we can pose those questions. We can turn it back over. But your questions are directed to the commission. So anything else besides that question? Any other questions or comments?
I suppose I would want to hear a little bit more. Commissioner Kopp, I think, hit on it, and I would like to hear a little bit more if there's going to be some slots that are specifically reserved in the community. I'd want to hear more information about that. That's all I have right now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Is there anyone else from the public? All right. I will, Mr. Falcon and Redan, there were a couple of questions. One was, what will happen to the residents in the current building when it is taken down? And the other question was, and I believe that there was a statement, there was an agreement with Midland Care for 10 units. Is there any other units that are obligated to any other organization in development? If you could answer those.
Okay, thank you for the question. The plan is to build the phase 1, the 40 units, and the existing 16-unit apartment that we currently operated right now will stay. They can still continue to rent there until such time that we're gonna demolish the old building. So before we demolish the old building, we have to make sure that these 16 families or 16 individuals that will be affected will have a space to the phase 2 or phase 3 for this project. So after the 40 units will be done under phase 1, they cannot transfer to that phase 1 yet. If they're still happy and there's no problem with their apartments, then they should be okay with that apartment yet. Because right now that's less cheaper because it's a $450 a month. This new build will cost them around $500 to $550. That's our depending on the construction cost for this one because the materials are going up. So I know every bit dollars matters to them. So I want to make sure that if they don't have a big issue to just move into the new one, they can. We don't encourage them to go to the new one because I know that they are they are very particular of their dollar income. So want to make sure that as long as their needs are being taken care of, their heating and cooling, their water pressure is still good. I don't believe that they have a good reason to demand to transfer to the new one. But if they do, and we have a vacancy, then we can do that too. So the next question is, I believe the next question is the organization.
Any other commitments other than the ones you mentioned to Midland?
Okay, so the commitment right now, we will have a formal meeting with Midland Care on Monday, April 25. So, but they are hinting that it's either they can partner with the construction, or they can just take some 10-unit apartments so that reserved for them. So we don't, right now, there is no definite answer to the question if there are organizations that already want to take some of it. So hopefully we can get the most advisable to this project. I know Topeka Rescue Mission have their guests pending for us because we don't have any vacancy. So there's some Catholic charities that have people for us and Vallejo, but we don't have any more vacancy. So right now, if whoever is more in need will go for the organization that will have more dire needs than other organizations compared to.
All right. I do have one follow-up to that. So in the phase 2 piece, is there going to be some construction of new apartments in phase 2 before the taking down of the existing building? Because if people aren't going to be required to move into phase 1, then what happens if you're tearing down in phase 2? Unless you're building some units in phase 2 for them to move into before you tear down. That's where I'm confused.
Yeah,
we left some of that a little bit flexible in our master plan, where potentially we could build 3 phases. There could be a middle phase and a final phase where we take down the last little apartment.
The way our plan is to be constructed is we are not disturbing the existing until the last time that we build the phase 3 so that we can transfer them before we demolish the old one.
Okay. So all of them will have the opportunity to transfer to a new unit on your property before the current building is taken down.
Yeah, they will not be on the street. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions of the public? Not. So we will close the public portion of the hearing. Are there any? And I would ask any members of the commission, based on this information, have any other further questions of the owner or the representative? All right, I'm not seeing any. So then I would leave it. Are there any other further questions or comments for staff, or comments in general by any members of the commission as it relates to this item?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cobb.
Mr. Chairman, help me out on this, would you? When I looked at the staff report and before getting the backstory about the target population here, I had real concerns about that concentration of dwelling units at that location, and these very small units. Just some real questions as whether or not that was an appropriate land use. And after hearing the applicant's explanation of what his business plan is, you know, I rethought this all pretty quickly, and then to bring up to the current moment, I don't know that there's any, despite the best of intentions that the applicant might have, I don't know that there's any guarantee that any of the 75 units would be resided in or have residents from the target organizations, Cornerstone and others. I mean, I know that's his intent, but you know, if word gets out that there's now an affordable housing unit going up, people will beat a path to the door and save themselves some money, find a roof over their head and save themselves some money, and the objective of the applicant I don't know how we absence of some agreements with the organizations like Vallejo, I don't know how he's going to set aside units for those populations. So help me out. What am I missing, Mr. Chairman?
This is Commissioner Herron. Could I actually chime in and make some comments, or I don't want to
Please do.
go out of turn. I don't think we can personally tell this gentleman on who he should and shouldn't lease to, but what I will speak to is the needs of the community. I do a lot of work in housing, not only in homelessness, but also understanding that 1/3 of our city is cost burdened with housing. So even if he doesn't utilize the agreements with Vallejo or the Topeka Rescue Mission and all the organizations he spoke of, if someone is in need of housing, uses this facility for housing, I think it's a win-win. Another thing, we're going to get into this when we're talking about the missing middle. Here with housing trends, they're really, really changing. About 30% of people looking for housing are single people. So I think looking at this project, is it meeting the growth management plan for the city? I think it does. I think we want more development inside city lines. This is within inside city lines. They're going to meet a need, whether it is going to be for the homeless or whether it's going to be someone who is looking for affordable housing. I think overall, this is a great project, and I think they have the right partners behind it, especially having the endorsement of Marsha Pope. I think when you're just looking at this as a whole, it's really meeting a need for the city because there literally are no 1-bedroom units available for rent or for purchase. And so I just kind of want to speak to that. Just looking at the project as a whole, even with the variances, I think is right in line with what we want to have for the city.
Commissioner Herron, can I ask you this question? And I appreciate your comments, and you're closer to the topic than I am. So is this the face of affordable housing for Topeka?
So I think affordable housing is a lot of different things. Affordable housing is also workforce housing. Affordable housing, it could be a mother with 4 children making $75,000 a year. So it's a very all-encompassing topic. I think that this is one of the arms that's going to fix the problem or bring a solution. And so I think with what we're going to be talking about next with the missing middle, I think this could be the beginning of creating resources for housing problems, which is what we really need to solve. So I don't necessarily think this is a face because affordable housing is a lot of different things, but it definitely is a major need in our community.
And it is a niche with just being a 1-bedroom, 2-person occupancy. It's not going to be, I mean, there's really very few aesthetics. There's no parkland or aesthetics like that I see in the design, but you don't have small children either. There's not families residing, going to be residing in these units. So it's a niche within the affordable market or the affordable housing demand, I guess.
And if you go back and look at the housing study that was done, this was actually one of the things that was spoken to during that housing study as a need for the community. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. I appreciate that conversation. Are there any other comments from members of the commission? All right. With that, I would entertain a motion on the item.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Based on the findings and analysis in the staff report, I move that the Topeka Planning Commission forward to the governing body a recommendation of approval of the proposed rezoning from C4 Commercial District to PUD/M-2 multifamily residential use.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I would second, Commissioner Warner.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is there a separate motion required for the variances, or does that motion contain the variance requests?
I will ask for staff for clarification on that.
Mr. Chair, the PUD motion would include all variances.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kopp, I take it that answers your question.
Yes, yes, it does.
All right. No other discussion, then I would ask for a call for the vote.
Okay, we'll start from the bottom and roll up. Mr. Warner,
Aye.
Mr. Teboben,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Ms. Messina,
Aye.
Mr. Kelp,
Aye.
Mr. Canar,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
and Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, sir. All right. We now move on to item E of the agenda, which is a presentation discussion on the missing middle code amendments. Not sure who's taking that.
I'll start out, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the indulgence of the commission tonight to hear our team. We've got about 4 folks lined up to take part in this presentation with you. If you remember, a couple months ago, we started out talking to you, kind of giving you an overview of our land use and growth management plan. In particular, we talked about those policies that drove some decision making outside the city limits with regard to some recent developments. Tonight, we wanted to do the twin of that, which is focus the discussion on what are we doing, what can we do to encourage investment and growth within our existing city limits, which happens to be our tier 1 of our urban growth area. So tonight we want to talk about what you heard earlier is missing middle, this term that maybe some of you have not heard, but the point of this discussion tonight is just, it's kind of a high level. We want to get indoctrinated, get everybody on the same page as to what this means or what this could mean. Do you think it fits within the sort of policies and regulations that the city should be adopting to further 2 very important documents? Chris, are you controlling this? Can you advance? Thank you. 2 very important documents here, which is the Land Use and Growth Management Plan and the Citywide Housing Market Study and Strategy, which you've already talked about tonight. So that's great. Set the table very good for us. I believe as you listen to us and get through this, you'll see that many of the recommendations contained within these 2 important documents really, this is kind of where a lot of those intersect. When you talk about infill development and density, walkability, affordability, equity, all of those sort of things that are outgrowths of these 2 documents, this is where they intersect. This is with the missing middle type of proposal. So go ahead to the next slide, Chris, and we'll talk about what missing middle actually is and see how that fits. So first, defining what that means. Literally, the missing, well, let's start with the middle. The middle part of the missing middle is everything from a housing standpoint between detached single family and mid and high rise apartment units. So that would include smaller attached housing such as accessory dwelling units, duplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, and small multifamily under 20 units. And that definition comes out of our housing study. This term is and this idea to focus more on what we would call compatible single family neighborhood development with these types is has been around for, probably the last 10 or so years as a kind of a growing trend nationally. Many cities have taken this on in increments in terms of trying to open up areas for this type of housing stock that they really don't have, which is what the missing is in the missing middle, which is you do not find these types of housing choices in most markets, or at least they have not been very prevalent in recent memory. So if you go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about the benefit, or actually let's talk about why even address this. So there's a couple different things going on. You've touched on them already in your discussions previously here. One is affordability. The other is marketability of your housing stock in your community. Most of the single family neighborhoods are not really matched up to provide what we would call a life cycle or aging in place choices across all spectrums of affordability and demographics. And I'll give you a couple examples. We are basically seeing a demographic trend, not just nationwide, but certainly here as well, where we are growing older. Our population is growing older, particularly those over 60 years or more. That cohort increased in the last decade here in the county and will only continue to grow. Without straining your eyes too much, that chart on your right shows that nationwide, the percent of folks 65 and older will just continue to make up a larger and larger share of the population as we go forward. Ultimately, till by 2060, almost 1 in 4 adults will be 65 and over. So we need to accommodate choices for that demographic. We will not have a choice. We have to. Likewise, at the lower end or the younger end, the millennials, for instance, which is the largest demographic and age cohort, bigger than the baby boomers right now, we did not grow in the county. It did grow, that between 25 and 34 years old did grow nationally, 12%. We did not. And the interesting part of this is beyond going into the next decade and in the future, young persons, those cohorts decline or halt, largely because there's no natural increase going to be occurring. There will be more deaths than births. So the only way to really grow that portion of your community will be by retaining them, as well as migrating in from the outside. So that non-natural growth, really migration will be, and immigration will be the only way to grow. And so what sort of housing choices do we need to attract and keep an affordable younger demographic? And that is kind of gets to the essence of why we're addressing missing middle. Chris, next slide. And then lastly, some of the benefits I've already touched on a little bit of, there's some naturally occurring affordable benefits here, if done correctly by design. These units tend to be smaller. There will be lower land and building costs per unit, probably less parking, as you saw in the last case, although that is not a definition of missing middle necessarily, but taking up less room for parking, which other staff will address here later in the presentation. You have potential for a second income from a unit that is rented out. So you can see some of the affordability aspects there. It also increases the local pool of developers and properties. One of the issues we have is that we do just in building supply. housing is the number of contractors and developers, and particularly locally based. You do not need to assemble large tracts of land and build to such scale that would really scope out many smaller businesses, smaller contractors who would be able to build at the scale that we're talking about. So this really opens up that pool of developers, smaller business developers, and the properties. There's just more ability to do that. And we can hopefully then grow at a neighborhood scale with what we would coin as more hidden density. The pictures on the slide here show two examples in Topeka of one recent. On the left is the Caston Townhomes, which was actually approved by the Planning Commission a couple years ago. It finally has been developed at 6th and Topeka. And then we have a couple older vintage style of duplexes within single family neighborhoods that kind of capture that form and scale of that neighborhood, of that single family neighborhood. So those are a couple just local examples. If we go to the next slide, I'm gonna stop there, and we're gonna make the handoff with Bryson Risley. He's gonna talk about the trends from what does our inventory look like from a missing middle standpoint here in Topeka? How does our zoning affect that, as well as some of the housing size housing size trends that is continuing nationally and locally. So Bryson will take you through that, and then he'll hand off to Mr. Sharp and Mr. Warner to wrap up. Like I said, we don't want to get into the weeds too much tonight. We want this fairly high level, but they will touch on a few paths you could go down by looking at our codes, if you'd like. And then we can open it up for discussion at the end. So Bryson, you want to take over?
Yes, thank you, Bill. Good evening, commissioners. So starting out, just some high level housing trends. So nationally, housing sizes continue to grow. If you look at where development was in the 60s compared to 2009, you've seen that single family homes have grown by 700 square feet. So each unit or each single family home is getting significantly larger. A third of American households are made up of a single individual, and up to 85% of those households will not include any children by 2025. Next slide, please, Chris. So kind of building off of that, trends we saw nationally, here we have a map on the right, residential building permits in 2021 for Topeka. The big takeaway from that information on the left is that the average valuation of these properties is more than double of those of new missing middle units, as well as the square footage is double or about a third higher than those we see in duplex and other missing middle as well. Next slide, Chris. Thank you. This is information from Zillow's Home Value Index. This is looking at all homes, but basically what you're seeing here is that in 2017, there was a pretty significant shift. We were averaging right around $105,000 at the average value, and today we're at $157,000. So there's been a pretty steep incline in that market as well. Next slide, please. So getting into that zoning side of things, this is looking at the city, at the full city, and breaking down into kind of the larger groups of what our zoning districts are. So here we can see that residential makes up 73% of the citywide. We'll continue to break this down and kind of get a little bit in the weeds. So next slide, please, Chris. So we break down that residential zoning. So here we have our residential zoning districts. The big thing here is if you look at R1 and R2, single family, we have just under 88% of the city that are zoned for those districts within residential zoning. The M1 through M3, we're really sitting at about 6%, and that PUD residential is also at 6%, which is kind of a variety of those as well. So we're really looking at a heavy proportion of our residential zoning as single family. Next slide, please. This is building off of that last slide. So we've taken those zoning districts and we've attributed the unit count to those as well. So Here, what we have is our R1 and R2. We excluded R3 and R4 because there was not a high number of units in those zoning districts. But you can see R1 and R2 have a large swath of single family. And once you get into the M1 through M3 and PUD, there's also some single family in there. With the big takeaway being, in a single family zone district, you get 2% missing middle units. And in those missing middle zone districts, you only get 60% of the units being missing middle. Next slide, please, Chris. This is, once we've taken all those unit counts, we were looking for a way to break this down. So by council district seemed like one appropriate way. So we're taking our single family, our missing middle, our higher density. Higher density is those that are 20 plus. As Bill stated earlier, missing middle is those between 2 and 20 units. And then specialty, which was more of the assisted living, special care type facilities, and looking at those on a district basis. So there's really a large variety of what we see. There's not a consistency across the board from council district to council district. Next slide, please. This is taking that same information we saw on the previous slide, stacking it so it is a 100% graph, so we can kind of do a little bit more of a visual comparison across districts here. This kind of helps provide some of that. It allows you to see where one district may have a higher percent of single family or higher density or missing middle than those other districts. Next slide, please. Pulling from that previous graph, we looked at just single family. You'll see here we have a single family target that was identified in the Topeka housing study. And down at the bottom, we've added a new row, which is the citywide. Here we have a citywide average of all at 63% single family units. Next slide, please. Missing middle, again, the Topeka housing study identified a target of 28% citywide. Currently, as you can see on that bottom line, we are at about 14%. So we are short on our missing middle. Next slide, please. And then higher density housing. The Topeka housing study stated that 12% should be a goal there. Currently, we're sitting at about 17%. Next slide, please. And this is kind of a way to finish and show where we should be heading as far as the Topeka housing study outlined. We've taken that information. So you have the typology of the unit, what our existing percent of the housing stock is, what the goal was that was identified in this Topeka housing study, what that difference was, and what those units are. Now, I just want to say with the 2040 unit count there, that is how many new units would need to be added to our housing inventory so that we reach those percent. That does not account for any new single family development. So that number is not a true number. As we know, single family units will always be incorporated, but that is a baseline for how many would need to be added by 2040 to reach that goal. With those numbers, again, adjusting as the actual market dictates. And then I believe I'm handing this over to Dan, and that is completes my portion.
Thanks, Bryson. Okay, commissioners, so how do we get there? We've talked about why missing middle is important. We've kind of broken down what the zoning and unit count looks like in the city. So how do we get there? How do we address, for lack of a better way to say it, kind of opening up single family for more missing middle? So one thing that we're exploring is making accessory dwelling units and potentially duplexes in single family districts an administrative review instead of requiring a zoning change. We've noted a need to kind of fiddle with our lot sizes and our density caps. We talked about density on the last project. Our density caps are not really in a good spot. Parking obviously came up last time too. So what are some ways we can decrease minimums or potentially establish maximums, which is not something we have in our parking currently, and then some zoning or policy changes to support these ideas. Next slide, Chris. So what is an accessory dwelling unit? So in other words, it might be known as a garlo, a granny flat, etc. So it's a smaller independent residential dwelling located on the same lot as a standalone single family home. So it can be attached to that home. It can be detached from that home. It can also be converted portions of an existing home. So in a basement, for instance. So why ADUs? Bill talked about this a little bit already, but so there's potential to increase housing affordability, makes the mortgage potentially cheaper for someone to own a property, provide a wider array of housing options. Next slide, Chris. So some of you are of a vintage that you might recognize this image here. So one of TV's great accessory dwelling units was Fonzie's apartment that was above the Cunningham garage. So you can actually search the internet and find the Fonzie ADU. I believe that's how we got these images. So ADUs are not a new thing here. You know, we've got them here in Topeka, and obviously TV Land had them as well. Next slide, Chris. So speaking of Topeka, these are some examples of accessory dwelling units that are in Topeka. These are all detached from the unit or the main unit, and these do exist today. Okay, next slide, Chris. Oh, and here's where I'm handing off to Mr. Sharp. Will's going to talk to you about a few things now.
Thank you, Dan. Like Bill mentioned earlier, there are examples of duplexes already in single-family neighborhoods, and this just shows that duplexes can fit into single-family neighborhoods. The image on the left is an example of a current vacant lot that is zoned as R1. A duplex can potentially go on that lot and have different entrances for each street frontage. So one entrance is on one street, the other entrance is on the other street on this corner lot. Another example of a duplex would be the right photo. You can see that the duplex is it's built within a single family neighborhood, and that it utilizes the same similar size, scale, and design of neighboring properties. And this just also shows that duplexes can be built within a neighborhood that can fit with the character of the neighborhood. Next slide, Chris, please. This also goes into an example of our lot size and density issues that we may face in the planning department. So for example, zoning in M1A requires new lots to be a minimum of 4,500 square feet per unit, and also has a max density of 10 units per acre. So if a new, let's say, fourplex would want to go into the city, it would technically require 18,000 square feet for the fourplex to go in. The example that we have, that photo on the right, is of an existing fourplex with square footage of only around 11,000 feet. And with this example, this fourplex would then can create up to 16 units per acre. Next slide, please. And again, what Bill was talking about earlier with parking, most people do not think of parking as a cost when it comes to residential or commercial. It's not on the top of everyone's mind. You're not putting coins into a parking meter or anything like that, but parking can be a hidden cost. Just like the slide says, the initial cost per space for surface parking can be up to $5,000. If you're renting, parking can add up to $142 per month to rent on average. Also with new developments, say a developer wants to put in a 20-unit multifamily development, that would require 40 parking spaces, which might not be possible on the piece of land where they want to develop. So how we address this problem currently is through PUDs and zoning changes that have to be brought up through the Planning Commission, then the City Council. In the future, with parking, we would like to change it so that either it is by rights through the parking code, or we can administratively approve a parking change, like Dan discussed earlier with, say, with like ADUs or duplexes. We just have to administratively approve it as opposed to it going to the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. Dan, you want to go ahead?
I will. So I'll finish up here, commissioners. There will be some policy changes afoot to support some of this missing middle ideas. Really might focus on these parking allowances or density allowances along bus routes or near commercial areas, for example. So just some policy changes to support some of this missing middle. We have some of that already in the comp plan, but if we're going to get to some of the administrative type decisions, we probably need to bolster our policy. And then next slide, please, Chris. Okay, so this is the last slide of this presentation. So Commission, you've seen this. Do you have thoughts on any of these questions? Are we ready to move down this path? Any no-goes? Do you have questions that need to be answered? Emphasize different things? Do you have thoughts about our next steps?
I'll jump in. A couple of thoughts that I had from the presentation. One, it was interesting, if you looked at what were the target numbers in the housing study, it seemed that most of the missing middle would be made up by a reduction of the multifamily and not necessarily from single family. So I don't know if that's an advantage or a disadvantage, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. The one concern I have about what's discussed so far is if we get away to, and I know this came up in our last matter discussed tonight, if we reduce parking requirements, it seems to me there ought to be some check that there is available off-street parking nearby, which was one of the concerns that I did have with the last item we discussed. And so I would want something about that in there, just so you know, that would be a concern of mine as we adjust what we require for parking. Those are my comments.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Scott.
If I could just add one thing in response to the presentation. Bill, I really think that accessory dwelling units are very important, very much in favor of those, however it can be done. But I would be concerned about any procedure whereby I'm able to put an accessory dwelling unit onto my property just through an administrative process, as opposed to having to come before. And I know it's a lot more work, but it seems to me, I think folks around places around the country have had difficulties with ADUs where it has been attempted administratively. You have a single family neighborhood, and all of a sudden your next door neighbor, you see them building something in the backyard, and you wonder what's going on. And said, well, I'm going to have another dwelling unit. There'll be another family living here next door to you. And if I don't have some notification of that and some opportunity to speak to it, I'm going to be very angry at the city. And you can build presumptions and make it very, very I don't want to say easy, but you can create incentives for folks to do the ADU and presumptions during a process before the Planning Commission, whether it's a special or conditional use permit or something totally different, different label on it. But just handling it all inside the administrative process, I think, creates some real concerns in the community. So I just put that marker down. I would like to see that happen in Topeka, but I think people need to have an opportunity to be notified and speak out if they have concerns about an ADU going in next door.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner Cap. Understood. That's kind of what we want to get your feedback on. I will say, yeah, we're not the first, and in our first city to do this. In fact, Topeka right now allows ADUs in non-single family residential districts. So if you have a M1 or M1A, you could do that by right. So you are correct. We are talking about open up that 85% or whatever it was, 88% of our residential land zone single family for that potential for an accessory unit. And I think what we've seen and what we would certainly, if you want to go down this path, we can certainly bring back the options that we would fully intend to have some standards regardless, whether it's a more administrative or discretionary. So we certainly expect to bring that be part of the process, size, placement, and other aspects of how it looks. Parking certainly would be part of the discussion. So it just wouldn't be wide open. But either way you go, you need that. And then I will say, the last thing I'll just say, since you brought up other cities, that they've all pretty much have started out that discretionary approval path, meaning it does have to go through planning commission or the council for approval, or they've limited it to very small areas of the city. I haven't seen a lot of examples where it is had the sort of impact probably the city was hoping it would have. Having that discretion, and that this I'm sure makes sense. It tamps down the number of these that would actually come to fruition in any community. So. So there would be a trade-off, if you will. So we fully intend to bring some sort of standards back if you want us to go down this path.
This is Commissioner Pearson. I just had a quick comment about I had a couple of quick comments. First, about the flow of the presentation. I think you asked that a little bit.
Yes.
It was a little confusing for me to, in the slide, why address missing middle, where everything was pointing to smaller, more cost-effective housing, and then kind of going through the housing trends nationally. That didn't quite jive for me. I couldn't figure out why you were telling me that instead of emphasizing the point about locally. My second question again relates to sizes of house, not an ADU, but I think I asked this during the process of the housing study and did not get a good answer. Maybe you can give me a better answer. Why isn't the city considering tiny houses as an affordable housing option? It's been written into the International Residential Code. There's guidelines, and we definitely have some land space for this. It would address our millennials who are trying to get into affordable housing options, seniors, everything that is on that missing middle page. Having the ability to have a tiny house community or tiny houses scattered throughout the city would be helpful to addressing that problem. So I guess I'm wondering why we are not considering that as an option.
Thank you, Commissioner Pearson. With regards to that last question, probably because we already allow it in our zoning code. So, and as you mentioned, the International Residential Code, which actually we need to be updating. It's currently a 2009. We're looking to update that this year to the latest model. But to answer your question, yeah, it is assumed, and maybe that's part of our presentation, that we need to augment is to make folks aware that tiny houses are authorized within our zoning code, or they're not prohibited.
Okay, it's going to my understanding is that an ADU is different than a tiny house in that it can be set on a separate lot by itself. So you're just saying it's not prohibited. And yes, I don't think people understand that that is an available option to them. The people that I've had this conversation with before says the city does not allow them. So there's a mixed message somewhere that needs to be clarified.
Yeah, that is certainly not not the truth. They are allowed. There is some very minimum, I believe, habitable space sizes as part of the code. But as you said, they are allowed zone. We're talking zoning here. And in terms of zoning, they are permitted one per lot. If you want to do more than one per lot, that's where you get into other zoning than R1 and R2. And so that might be a form that could still take place in any non-R1 and R2 districts. But if you're talking about having more than one on a single lot, then yeah, that is not currently allowed in a single family district.
Okay. All right, thank you.
This is Commissioner Herron. I had two questions. One, I just want to make sure, are you all asking us if we want to move towards creating more opportunities for the missing middle in the community? Is that kind of the question that's being proposed?
That's the big question, bigger, higher level question. And then subsequent questions would be how far do we go?
So I guess, and I'm sure we'll vote on this, but I definitely would like to see more of these opportunities presented. And then my next question, when they're talking about the total creation of new housing units, are they talking about new construction, or are they also considering the revitalization of existing structures?
When we refer to future units in the community, it assumes either a new unit is constructed. The only way to add a rehabilitated unit would be to, again, add a unit where it's currently not. So that could be a reuse of a building that currently isn't for housing, such as a hotel, like you saw tonight, or a non-residential building. But yeah, any future unit in those counts, I guess, is going to have to be created. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and it does. And I think I'm still learning all of this. So I think that's something that we need to take into consideration when determining how we're going to implement this, because Topeka actually has a lot of housing buildings that are available. They're just not inhabitable. And so how do we maybe incentivize for developers to get a hold of these structures and maybe create some of this? Because a lot of these units are in places where there's already these type of units available. I had been listening to just a few things, trying to educate myself more on this. And a lot of these homes were built prior to the 1950s. Well, a lot of our oldest neighborhoods already have these existing structures where there might not be as much adversity to create them. So I don't know how we want to incorporate that or consider that with some of the things you all will be planning, but I think that'd be something to look at.
Thank you. Yes.
Is this Commissioner Kanar? On the first issue as to whether or not we should be going in this direction, I would say yes, and aggressively so. Parking was mentioned. I would assume if we're looking at requirements on that and revising that, we're going to be looking at relative housing, household size and workers per household now, as to opposed to when original parking requirements were put in, because I'm going to guess we're looking at least 20% decreases in those numbers since the original formation of our policies. And in general, I thought the presentation was good. But when staff is talking about it, and I'm sorry, Dan, you're kind of going to get singled out on this one, but things like we're not in a good place aren't terribly helpful. Even if I know why we're not in a good place, members of the public that are listening may not understand. It would be better to have a qualitative explanation of why we're not in a good place than that overbroad statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Herron. I just have one thing you had put on here. What information do we need before moving forward? I think it'd be really helpful to have transportation trends, because if we're talking about whether we really need parking spaces, if nationally and locally we're looking at more biking and other forms of transportation, having that to take into consideration on whether we should be having a certain amount of parking spots, I think will be helpful.
Very good. Yes, that's exactly the sort of thing we were asking. So if I may, so what I'm, and thank you for the feedback. The biggest thing that we needed to come away with tonight is whether or not, again, as Commissioner Kennard put it, should we be going down this path? Should we be opening and looking at our code and our policies for land use to accommodate more missing middle types of development, and including our everything from the types of housing to parking regulations for housing. So I'm taking this as something that, yes, you do want to see us go down this path. And as I said, it's just a question of how much. Some of that will clear itself up as we report back. But one of the big things with regard to this is going down this path is sort of that public engagement part of it. So you ultimately will, we did this with a lot of our bigger code amendments where we engaged the public, but really before it came back to you, we even formed a committee, subcommittee, had a planning commissioner or two sit down with us and others to maybe craft through some proposals and get more public feedback on that. Do you have any thoughts on how you want to go about that process? The options could be, again, we go away. We go away, you don't see us until we come back, and we develop some sort of community engagement along these lines to test the waters, if you will. We also have another option of working with you more closely, coming back to you, kind of toggling back and forth between you and the public, even opening up your meetings so that you can take public comment, even on drafts. And so you can kind of advertise in a way to make your meetings or part of your meetings that discussion. And so you can hear more from neighborhoods and neighbors where this may be accepted more or less accepted more. And then we also can fine tune this a lot more. We can get into more of some harder proposals to run by you first before we go out to the community and neighborhoods. So those are sort of three options in my mind as I'm thinking here. Does any of those, knowing what we're getting into and knowing that this could be somewhat divisive depending on the neighborhood. We saw a little bit of that when we did short-term rentals, but by and large it ended up being somewhat accepted as this is this is progress. This is a good way to help inject some use and investment into underused homes. So this is another thing that we're going to, we're not going to do quick. We're not going to do rapid, but we're going to move as probably as fast as you want us to move. But engaging the public, I think, is which path we go down with that. We would like some direction on that if you had any.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Scott.
I have pretty strong feelings about what Bill's talking about. We're the accountable body. Bill and his staff, they are staff, and ought not, in my opinion, ought not to be going out into the community just saying, here's our staff ideas. I think, if you come to the Planning Commission with maybe broad concepts, and get those blessed, then you can go out to the community and say, these are issues that the Planning Commission is considering. So you're not hanging out there. So the staff's not just hanging out there, vulnerable to slings and arrows. Okay.
That makes a great deal of sense. Yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also believe when we get down to making some more specific decisions, I do like the idea that there be a public hearing process at that point. So when we're getting down to considering something and the public sees that, then they have the opportunity to make their comments to us for consideration before we make any determinations.
This is Commissioner Pearson. I think you should make this as a participatory process as possible. Many times organizations, governments get into trouble in the end and end up in long drawn out conversations and fights with the public because they have not included at least some key representatives from the public. And how do you decide who is a key representative? That is really anybody's guess. No one will ever agree with your bottom line decision as to who to invite to the table. But the more, especially on something like this, that is going to have broad reaching impact. I think you need to keep this as open, as transparent as possible. Maybe not. I hate designing policy by committee. Do not get me wrong. I hate it, but you have to make sure that there is input along the way in some way, shape, or form. It cannot just be an internet survey. If half of your city is digitally challenged, you're going to need to have some actual FaceTime. So that's just my personal opinion.
This is Commissioner Herron and Donna Ray. Commissioner Donna Ray Pearson. I really appreciate your thoughts. And actually, in my mind, I think it should be a combination of those things because we also need to make progress. And at the end of the day, somebody has to be accountable for making a decision. And there are at times when constituents are not able to make that decision. One thought that I have is maybe reaching out to local NIAs so you have a voice of the neighborhood, but then also reach out to local organizations that deal with housing specifically and understand the needs of housing. But then make the final decision with the with the Planning Commission, because I also think there's a certain expertise that we're probably going to understand the needs and what needs to happen, where you're trying to get quantitatively, we know what the solution should be, but you're trying to help someone qualitatively understand that. So I do agree, we need to have some community input. So maybe that'll be NIAs and housing organizations or people that have a voice to the community, maybe create a task force and say, hey, what are you seeing? What would your neighbors like? But I think having the Planning Commission really make those decisions, just because at the end of the day, our city needs progress and we need to move forward if we really want to create this a city that people are going to want to live in the future, especially when you're looking at the fact that our young population isn't growing. And this speaks directly to that need. So.
Great, thank you.
this is Commissioner Kennard. I generally agree with, at least I think I'm agreeing with Commissioner Hare on there that I mean, I think there has to be some give and take. I think the idea of staff and us working on some initial things and getting a basic product to go out and work with a task force. And as noted, there's always going to be people that are not at the table that maybe should be at the table, but you can't invite every resident. So people are going to be left out. A little give and take is going to happen. So there's may have to be several rounds of this. One thing I would say as to how far to go, if what you're bringing to the commissioners, if you're not getting pushback from members of this commission, you're not going far enough. If you have to push and get reined in, because otherwise you end up going soft on it, and then nobody wants to be the one rocking the boat. So that's my thoughts.
Very good.
This is Commissioner Messina. I would agree with that. I think we really need to think outside of the box and, you know, kind of building a foundation with you guys as staff for, you know, soliciting some just general feedback, and then putting together, you know, a foundation for us to look at as a commission, and then continually go back to the public and re-edit it. I think that would probably be the best way, so we can continue to you know, think outside of the box, and then also look at all avenues for trying to improve this. But I am super excited to see that we're going in this direction, and I think we should push it as much as we can. So I am in full support.
Great, thank you. If we had to tap, we did this with the sign code. If we had any commissioners that would be willing to roll up their sleeves a little bit more on this issue, please let us know. We don't have any official committee. Quite honestly, the Plan Commission could create a subcommittee if they wanted as well. We're not necessarily asking you to do that tonight or suggesting it. I think what we can do though is at our next opportunity is to come back to you kind of with round two and talk about how we think we could do a process that might work with based on the comments we received. But to do that, kind of the messy part of this, which is back in the kitchen, creating that foundation, that basic plan to come back to you. I'm not sure we want to do that at the commission meetings, but we would do that with a more of a subcommittee with staff. And so we would certainly welcome anybody on the commission that would like a part in that. In fact, it would help greatly if we had that. And then we've talked about some focus groups, getting out to the neighborhoods, just testing a few neighborhoods early in the process to see if this, you know, what sort of feedback we would get. So there's a few ways to go here. But I think the next round, when you see us again, we'll have more of a refined, maybe next immediate steps, along with some meat on the bones for you to react to as to how far, again, you want to go. So if that sounds okay, that's the feedback has been tremendous here. We need to digest it.
Any other comments from anyone on the commission? All right. Well, Ms. Freihander, I think if you feel you got enough feedback, then go with it. And look forward to hearing where we're going to go next.
Thank you all.
All right. I believe next on the agenda, if I ever, it's communications.
Yes, that's me.
I believe there's a hand up.
Mr. Chair, you had a Mr. Bell.
Okay, Mr. Bell? Yes.
We're still taking comment on the missing middle.
I don't know at this point, Mr. Bell, if that's really a public issue. It's just being presented. It's because it's early in the stages. So I don't know the standards.
Well, right. And the only reason I bring it up, and it's quite frankly why I attended this meeting tonight, was discussion about this. We've been in discussions recently, 2 members of a Citizens Advisory Council Committee on Affordable Housing with Dan Warner on a number of the issues that have been discussed regarding the missing middle housing. And so that's what I wanted to make a brief comment on.
I would go to Mr. Fyander. My thought is this was just to get feedback from the commission as to where we wanted them to go to. Certainly feedback from your organizations and the public, Mr. Bell, I think are going to be opportunities to do that. I just don't know, Mr. Fyander. I don't recall doing that in this case when we're not dealing with a public hearing matter. So I don't want to break protocol.
No, Mr. Chair, you're right as far as protocol. What I will say, I'll step out of protocol for a second and just say with Mr. Bell, we definitely can talk offline with Dan and us about maybe your thoughts of how do we best engage citizens, neighborhoods. That came through tonight clear. So I would, if that's okay with you, we would love to talk to you about that, and then come back to the Plan Commission with more formed thoughts.
Yeah, as long as the public's views on this are made a part of the record, and if that's the way we have to go about doing it, then that works for me. I'm supportive.
I know, I know you are. I think there will be a chance early enough on in the process that we could get open it up to some public comment. So that's one of the things I think the Plan Commission needs to just stamp maybe the next time we come back.
Right. I think there's been obvious discussion both early, in the middle, and certainly I expressed at the end before any final determinations. There should be opportunities for input from the public, as I've heard tonight from the commission. So I don't think the commission is certainly in favor of as much input as we can gather. Although, as Commissioner Kennard said, you won't get every single person in there, but we'll certainly hopefully create enough opportunities for many of the key persons, both individuals and organizations who are connected to this issue in our community, have the opportunity to speak and provide input. All right, and with that, Mr. Fyander, are there any other communications from the department?
You did. I have 2. Just to follow up, the 3 zoning cases were that you heard last month were approved. The D2 zoning, the tow lot on Kansas Avenue, and now I'm forgetting the other 3rd one, but all 3 were approved this past the last week at council. The other major communication just wanted to touch base on was if there's any discussion you want to have on going back to our in-person meetings. I had sent something out, and I think Chris had communicated the plan of going back to in-person meetings and starting in May. That doesn't preclude us from ever having a presentation or comments from that are virtual. But as far as a default, we would expect everything to be held in person to the greatest extent possible. Any extenuating circumstances we can accommodate. So didn't know if there's, go ahead.
I appreciate it, Mr. Fyander. We had talked about having a conversation about this at this meeting, at the last meeting, but the powers that be of the city have sort of stepped in and kind of said, no, that's where we're going to go, which I have no problem with, but just wanted to put that out there because we had said we would provide the commissioners the opportunity to provide input at this meeting. So I didn't want to disregard that since we'd said you could do that, but obviously short of some major piece of information that they hadn't considered, we're going to be going live in person next month.
Yeah, I mean, the big consideration here is accommodating the public
Right.
to the, and I think as I heard from some council members and some citizens who would like to come before you, who would like to encourage more greater public engagements. Going back to in person was believed to be the overriding sentiment to help with that. So it's less about accommodating us and you, and more about how do we best accommodate the public going forward if we can all be together. So that's kind of where that was coming from.
Right. And I have no problem with it. So if there's nothing else from you, Mr. Feiander, no other comments from the commission? Does anyone have any final comments or questions? Then I think we're good. I would entertain, do we do a motion or do we just, I declare, I keep forgetting.
You usually do a motion.
All right, I request a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Commissioner Dean.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Herron, I second.
All right, and I believe with the motion the second, then that counts as our adjournment, if I recall. So we are done. Thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in person next month.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.